All right, here we go. So, political cartoon from yesterday, your assignment. I'm gonna have those grades in as soon as possible. But what do we got? What do we got? So, pretty simple political cartoon describing the 1920s and Al Capone, organized crime. Cassidy, what do you have here? What's like the main idea of this political cartoon? Yeah, what amendment was that? 18th Amendment. Okay, so that's kind of like the law down here, the police officer. Good. And what was the act that helped establish this across the land? What was that called? The Volstead Act. Yep, good job. Good, good. All right. And what's going on? Go ahead. Yeah, a lot smaller, right? Yeah, yeah. So the law, police officer, the police authority, they're trying to bring justice to these cities and try to stop the illegal transportation, manufacture of alcohol in the United States. But with organized crime, we talked about Al Capone yesterday, the mafias that were really in charge of these cities. It was very hard to bring them down. They're almost larger than the law, right? And this political cartoon explains that. So with the night organized crime, there's no way that the law can bring it down. It's just too large, and we all know it's like it's all thick with armor. And it's almost impenetrable to the law, and that's really how it was in the 1920s. Okay, they had so much money, so much profit, and a lot of people weren't favorable of the 18th Amendment, and they just kind of did what they wanted. And how could they do that? So describe a political cartoon here with all the money that's laying around. What does it say, Kale?
It says bootleg profit.
Yeah, bootleg profits. Good job. And what else does it say along the sides here? I know yesterday the picture I had was might be a little blurry, but what else does it say around here? Can you read that? Oh, there you go. Money to bribe politicians, money to hire the best lawyers, money to bribe jurors, and money to beat the law. So, really, the mafia had many of these public officials, political officials in their back pocket, right? They're paying off police officers, they're paying off jurors, they're paying off judges, they're paying off, well, really to afford the best lawyers. And it was almost like they're impenetrable. And that organized crime was just larger than life, and there's really no taking it down. And even the public, right? A lot of times you want to side with the police, but in this case, many people just wanted to have a drink, go out to these speakeasies, and enjoy themselves. And it just shows that the 18th Amendment and larger urban areas like Chicago, New York City, you name it, they weren't favorable of this amendment whatsoever. And many police officers, like I said, they're the ones actually indulging in this nightlife and drinking and going to speakeasies as well. And it just goes to show the atmosphere throughout the 1920s and moving into the 1930s. Right? It just really is controlled by these large mafia leaders like Al Capone. All right, I thought that political cartoon was pretty good in expressing how organized crime was just really larger than life. All right, bell ringer for today. Find it. There it is. So describe how organized crime emerged during the 1920s. Explain how figures like Al Capone made a living in Chicago during the Prohibition era. There we go. Are we getting snow tomorrow?
Getting some.
Some.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man.
It's a 2 hour delay.
Jeez. I need the weatherman here.
I just watched Peyton.
Oh, the Simmer synopsis.
That's right.
I actually am a follower of that as well on Instagram. Yeah. Nice, nice. All right, so organized crime. Let's get to it here. So where did it begin? How did it happen? How did it happen? So we talked a little bit about a movement already before organized crime that occurred. And this was to try to end all abuse and end all issues in the family households in the United States. And many people said this was kind of a fundamentalist movement. And what was that called? Gabe, do you remember?
Why it was off.
Yeah, what was the movement called? Ban alcohol. I think it was one of your vocab terms. I hope I had it. Maybe I didn't.
That women's Christian conference.
Yeah, good job. The temperance movement. Good job. So the temperance movement was to try to ban alcohol in the United States because they thought, well, this was causing a lot of the abuse, a lot of the issues in the household, and that we're stepping too far away from our religious core values, right? And as these industries, as these cities are popping up across the United States, this is corrupting our society. So with the temperance movement, okay, women were primarily the focus around initiating a lot of this movements like the 18th Amendment, Prohibition, Volstead Act, that's scattered all across the U.S. to try to protect our households, to try to protect our core values, our religious core values, this fundamentalist view. And a lot of people weren't a fan of it, right? Especially in these larger cities. So that's what brought on this organized crime. So if you make something illegal like alcohol, the sale and production, the manufacture, the transportation of alcohol, chances are you're going to have people that are trying to fill the void and supply that to the people. So yesterday we talked about speakeasies. What are speakeasies? What were speakeasies? Kale, go ahead.
It was like a hidden bar kind of area.
Yeah, like a hidden bar. Yeah, good job. And
Conversation,
what's that?
where you have conversation,
Yeah,
because you
speakeasy.
can speak.
Yeah. So this was a place like a hidden bar within a city that people would need a code to get in. So it's like either a secret knock or a secret code word, and they let you in. And for the most part, it's like under the ground, or maybe it's hidden behind a business or an industry. And this was to try to keep out of the plain sight of the American public, because we all know that getting involved in this type of behavior was frowned upon, was in some cases illegal, especially for the people supplying the alcohol to the people. All right, so we talked about yesterday some speakeasies around. I know I mentioned one in Harrisburg. I think that was pretty cool. Did I talk about that yesterday? Yeah, and then in St. Clair, I think it's pretty cool. It's called the Wooden Keg. Miss O'Neill, you ever check that out?
No.
Oh, it's pretty cool. It's like this old mine shaft, this old mine entry, and down in the
Oh,
bottom of
yes,
the
I
restaurant.
did.
Yeah,
And
I thought we talked about it
And
beginning
there's a
here.
the trail that goes under to like a church.
Yeah, underneath to a church. Yeah.
Yes, I could.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. Underneath the ground in St. Clair, underneath this restaurant, they have this old design bar of what it kind of looked like in the 1920s. And there's this old mine shaft that kind of you walk back a tunnel in a way that connected to the church, and people would sneak out underneath the mine tunnel and have a few beers underneath the one restaurant there in St. Clair. It's pretty cool. So if you guys get the chance to go out to St. Clair for some reason, check that out. Did I talk about Yingling yesterday, the factory? I didn't. Oh, I apologize. I must have missed it there. But Yingling, if you guys ever check out the tour in Pottsville, they describe how they survived, how they stayed afloat during the prohibition. You can imagine a beer manufacturer. If it's illegal to manufacture, transport alcohol, what do? And if you check out the museum in Pottsville, they talk a little bit about what they did and how they transitioned to creating ice cream and potato chips and common goods like that. And at the same time, they're still pushing out alcohol in the mountainside right there in Pottsville, which is pretty cool to hear about. So that's some interesting facts about locally of what they did to try to survive through this prohibition era. So if you get the chance, check that out in Pottsville or St. Clair. All right, so speakeasies, these hidden bars. What about bootleggers? What were bootleggers? Carol, what were bootleggers? Yeah, the transporting of it, right? So they call it bootleggers because people would strap it to their leg and put their pants leg over top of it, their clothing, and try to hide it as they're transporting this alcohol to places. Let's say to speakeasies, right? And this really got elaborated to the point where you might have whole trucks that have, let's say, bricks around it, and inside the bricks would be beer or alcohol or any type of crates. They might be packaging some sort of good. You smash open the top, you throw out the good, let's say just, I don't know, lampshades, and then you bust out the bottom board, and there might be beer scattered across the bottom, the way to transport the alcohol and try to conceal it. And those were bootleggers at the time. So make sure you guys remember those two terms. And Al Capone, we talked about him a lot yesterday and how he rose to really this huge character in American history, one that we remember a lot. Obviously, public enemy number one, but he was very popular. He was very respected throughout Chicago because he supplied the people what they really wanted. Even police officers, politicians, obviously many of them were paid off so that he could continue his business and his transportation of alcohol. But for the most part, everybody loved him. Like I mentioned yesterday, Babe Ruth was a big fan of him. Him and Al Capone are best friends. And whenever the New York Yankees would play in Chicago, they would always meet up. And Capone showed him a good time, which I think is an interesting story. And it just showed how popular he really was. But how did Capone fall? What eventually took him down? Tanner?
Taxes.
Yeah, tax evasion. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like, well, how is he affording this luxury style living? How is he affording all these homes and all these new clothing, eating at the finest restaurants? Well, they really couldn't tie it to anything. Yeah, he was laundering money. He had many other businesses where he tried to show that where the profits were being made, but it was to a point he was making millions and millions of dollars in the 1920s that it was unreasonable, and everybody knew exactly what he was doing. So they linked it to his taxes eventually by taking some of his bookies, right? Some of the books that were showing where that money was flowing to. And he served some jail time. We talked a little bit yesterday how he had syphilis and how this was a bacterial infection that affected his mind. And obviously he got many other diseases which caused his death in 1947. What jail did he go to? What jail was he at here? Cassidy? Alcatraz. Yeah, good job. The Rock. You ever see that movie, Miss O'Neill?
Mhm.
Oh, I love that movie. Love that.
So I know there's a good movie.
The Untouchables.
Untouchables.
Yeah.
We should watch.
Who are the Untouchables? That was a vocab term yesterday. Cassidy? Take him. Yeah, good job. Good job. They were pretty successful at doing so. They said about $13 million in a day's money that they intercepted from being transported to these speakeasies. And the Untouchables were the government agent that took them down. Who led it? What was his name? Tanner?
Elliot Ness.
Elliot Ness. Yep, good job. Good work. So there's,
We could go on a field trip. I think we could hit the Wooden Keg and the Galen Brewery in one day.
I'm getting their cheese balls. Those are my favorite out
Oh,
there.
they good.
Oh, yeah, we can go to the Yingling tour.
Yeah.
That'd be
And
awesome.
they show you how they built the walls down there in the basement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And then you and I can have a soda at the end. Yeah. Not bad. All right, Butler Act, and the Stokes trial. We'll just say Gears T. How about that? Since that's right there. That was a neat film there. Not bad. That's good. You're able to play now? Yeah, good. Jeremy, all finished? Good. All right, I'll give you another minute here and talk about it. Did you win the other night, Kara? Did you win the other night? Oh, who was that against? Okay, are they pretty good?
No, I just know.
Oh, I got you. All right, the Butler Act. What do we have? What do we got for the Butler Act? Jamie, what do you have? All right, yeah, good job. Good job, especially in these southern states like Tennessee. This was forbidding public education to talk about the theory of evolution. And why do you think? Why do you think? What were the two movements, like I said, that were occurring in the 1920s? What was one of them that especially found in the rural areas, southern states, that was revolved around religion? What was that movement called? That group of people? We had the modernists and Haley? The fundamentalists. Yep, good job. So the fundamentalist movement was still revolved strictly around religion. And the Butler Act was established to make sure that there will never be any type of teachings that might contradict the Bible and any type of learnings from the Bible. And just showing that religion was still a primary factor in people's lives that was really dictating their lives and their principles and their traditions, to a point that they're not even going to accept theories like evolution to be taught in public schools. Again, there's a lot of people that were kicking back against this law, which we'll talk about today with the Scopes trial. All right, so we talked about the fundamentalist movement, okay, and how these people were not accepting of these new modern viewpoints and new modern theories that are emerging from these industrial areas, from these urban areas, okay. And they were still holding on to their religious ties, these religious backgrounds. So with the fundamentalists, they're doing everything they could to try to keep these principles in the household. And we already talked about the temperance movement, how the 18th Amendment was passed, and how there was a lot of kickback against that. And it just goes to show that there was constant conflict with the new modern beliefs, theories, secular views, and uses of science, of understanding. And we still have many of the population of the United States, especially government officials at this time, that were still revolved around religious beliefs and wanted to hold tight to that. And we're not accepting of the new patterns that were emerging in American society with industrialization. All right, so with that, this is going to create laws and acts in the southern states that were forbidding of the teaching of these new theories in public schools. Why? Well, we need to protect our children, right? We need to make sure that the children aren't corrupted by these new theories and these new beliefs that might pull them away from their religious backgrounds, their religious beliefs. Does that make sense? If that happens, well, this could cause more conflict amongst the population, amongst the communities in the U.S., and take away these religious principles that are made to try to protect many homes and families. Got that, Matt? All right. So the Scopes trial. Oop. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. So the Scopes trial in 1925, Tennessee passed the Butler Act, which was trying to prevent the teachings of evolution in public schools. John Scopes, he was a biology teacher. He was actually a substitute. He was actually a football coach of that school in Tennessee. And he was a substitute teacher. And when it came across in the chapter of the textbook about evolution, he decided to teach it. And that went against the Butler Act. So many kids in the classroom were clearly upset by this. Well, they maybe just went home and talked to their parents about what was being taught in the school, which was evolution. And that was forbidden. That was something that shouldn't have been talked about or discussed because of the Butler Act. But Scopes knew that, well, we need to broaden our minds a little bit more. We need to be accepting of these new theories and understand these new principles. Okay. Even if you're not a firm believer of it, it's important to maybe just hear about some of these new theories and understandings of sciences at that time. And again, not to contradict anybody's religion at all, right? He's just teaching the methods, he's just teaching the understanding of it. But because of fundamentalist values in this community in the South and the southern states, right, they were really up against in arms against John Scopes to the point where they're actually going to put him in jail and fine him $100, which in the 1920s, $100 a lot of money. I don't know what it was actually. Does anyone want to look that up? 1925, $100, today's money. I don't know. Anybody check that out? That'd be interesting to know. But the ACLU, they were looking to try to back Scopes because they want this prevalent. They want to show that we need to step out of these religious tendencies. We need to accept these new modern values. The only way to move forward with industrialization, modernization in our country is if we maybe just step out of these fundamentalist backgrounds, these fundamentalist grounds. So there was a strong backing behind Scopes as well, all around the country. And this was one of the most important court cases that was ever heard of in the 1920s and really of the century. This was a challenge of the fundamentalists and the modernists. And this court case actually shows clips in the courtroom. In the 1920s, that was unheard of. okay, where radio broadcasters were tuning in live to the event. Again, something that was never seen before, especially in a courtroom. So with the ACLU, they hired the most famous lawyer at the time, Clarence Darrow, to back Scopes and this modernist viewpoint, to try to defend him, to try to express that maybe he was allowed to teach these new ideas, these new theories of evolution in the school. It opens the minds of the people of these communities in the South. And the prosecution hired, William Jennings Bryan. You remember him? Do we? Cassidy? How do you remember him? We talked about him before. 3 times. Yeah, did he win? No, he lost all 3 times. But he was still popular amongst the people. Everybody knew who he was. He was a Democratic candidate. And like I said, in the South, he had a firm background. He was a key figure in the South, especially because of his fundamentalist viewpoints. And he ran for president 3 times. Everybody knew him around the country. So to try to defend the Butler Act, defend the fundamentalist values, they thought it was primary, it was paramount to have William Jennings Bryan try to convict Scopes through this Butler Act. And it actually worked in the favor of William Jennings Bryan initially. And it showed exactly where the country was, that we're still rooted, deeply rooted in these fundamentalist backgrounds. And Scopes was fined $100. But it was interesting to note because it looked like the modernists, it looked like Clarence Darrow was actually winning this court trial. It just was proven through many principles in the courtroom that it looked like it was going to go in the favor of Scopes, and that he really wasn't a man that was causing any harm. Yeah, he broke the Butler Act, but it wasn't like he was trying to persuade individuals or students to accept evolution as a primary theory and to forget about their religious backgrounds. He wasn't doing that whatsoever. He was just talking about the theory and really just discussing it with the students. It wasn't like he was trying to change your opinion or challenge the community or challenge the fundamentalist value. He was just teaching about the theory itself. And again, the jurors, the committee actually sided with William Jennings Bryan and the fundamentalists. So in the court case, the initial court case, the fundamentalists won. And William Jennings Bryan was finally a victor in some sort of way. But this court ruling would later be reversed just a year later, which is interesting to note. And it just goes to show exactly where they're at in the South, how this wasn't accepted, and how the Butler Act was something that was going to be sticking around for a short period of time anyway. And that the South still had a different viewpoint comparable to the rest of the nation at this time. We all know with the Jim Crow laws, obviously, with segregation. But here now with fundamentalism and just teaching a theory in public schools still is very challenging at this time. All right, here's just a political cartoon. All right, and then here's just the court ruling. Darrow kind of winning. Actually looks like he's winning the court ruling, but jurors actually sided with William Jennings Bryan. All right, is there any questions on that, guys? So again, another key win for the fundamentalists, still moving into the 1920s, right? So with the 18th Amendment, Prohibition, and now 1925, the Scopes trial, the fundamentalists are holding strong. But that would change here quick. Obviously, like I said, a year later, this would be overturned. Scopes wouldn't really face any jail time, too much anyway, and he wouldn't have to pay the fine because it was overturned. And eventually, we all know that Prohibition will come to an end in 1933. All right, that's all I have for today. What's up, Gabe?
Can you go back to the last slide with like the writing?
Yeah,
Or
just
something